Thank you very much. Good morning to all of you. My name is Klaus Buddeberg. I'm from the University of Hamburg. I'm talking about financial practices of adults. And if you remember the opening session, you remember the slide Deborah Meller displayed with the word cloud. And I tried to find the word practices on this cloud. I did not find it. Either it wasn't there or it was very small, which oh, uses what there, okay. But let's see, that makes clear that PIAAC, there's a lot of PIAAC research about competencies, but there's not so much research on practices. And I'm happy to present something about a current project about financial education in Germany. Give us some words about financial literacy and financial practices in a nutshell. Formulate my research questions, have one slide about variables I used, and then we'll concentrate on findings and offer some suggestions for the discussion. So what does financial literacy imply? I learned from Dave Taut that we actually should talk about financial numeracy, but that's another discussion. There are quite a number of definitions, and one of them, for example, is used by the European Commission, that it implies knowledge and skills needed to make important financial decisions. Of course, it's a little bit longer in total. But there are other scholars and organizations which say that there must be more than just skills. For example, Huston says it's understanding and use, or the OECD and the International Network for Financial Education says it consists of financial skills plus attitudes plus financial behavior. And these two words marked in bold, use and behavior, I think can link these questions to the PIAAC dataset, which offers information about practices. So if you inform yourself about financial literacy worldwide, I don't go into details, you will, for example, see a map like this one, by a global survey where you can see the darker the country is, the higher is the proportion of adults who are tested as financially literate. There's an extra discussion how valid these information are. But we could draw the conclusion that it's quite fine in Germany, dark country, dark color, high proportion of financially literate adults. But if we look at this component I just mentioned of financial behavior, or practices, we could see that in the left side there was a question about how in the same survey with the world map, how do you keep a keen watch over your finances? And you see that just a little bit more than 50% of the adults in Germany answered yes, I do. Or on the right side there was asked, do you carefully consider every purchase? And it's also a position of Germany on the scale quite on the bottom. So we could draw the conclusion that maybe the financial literacy is relatively high in Germany, but maybe there are some problems in financial behavior. So that's opening my question. And I picked up two variables from the PIAAC dataset. As you know, there are practices which have been asked regarding numeracy, literacy, problem solving. And I picked up two of the numeracy practices in everyday life, which can be related to financial questions. One is to undertake calculations, and the other one is a little bit more long-term oriented, I would interpret it. It's to use information in order to make informed financial decisions. So that's the two variables I'm going to talk about regarding some categories. And these categories I want to show you are employment versus unemployment, gender and age. I'm going to explain why I choose these three. There could be others to do this kind of examination. In 2019, Anke, myself, Alina Redmer, Harald Ansen and Jesper Dannert published a paper in the Adult Education Quarterly titled Vulnerable Subgroups. And we try to react on the stereotype that adults in strained economic situations might be responsible for their own situation just because they are too passive in having control over their finances. And luckily, we could at least relativize or reject this stereotype, finding out that especially adults, for example, unemployed adults, do calculations about their costs and budgets quite regularly, maybe daily or at least once a week. The second category I want to look at is gender. because international surveys like the one I displayed with this world map often show or often declare that women in average have lower financial literacy skills than men have. And there is a discussion maybe inspired by Jean Leif in the late 80s that there might be a gender-specific money management, leaving the small money for the women and the big money, the big decisions to men. We come back to that later. And regarding age, I would suggest that there are certain passages in life when, for example, young adults leave school, enter the job, or later people leave the job life and go into retirement. That might be situations where there's special need, more need for getting orientation in your financial situation than in other phases of life. So my research questions are, the first one will be quite easy to answer. Do the results which we found out in 2019, unemployed adults calculate more often than the average population, hold true for the cycle, hold true for the second cycle of PIAAC? And the second one is, does the frequency of practices differ? If you look at this one variable, undertake calculations, which appears to be a little bit more every day, and the other variable using information for financial decisions, which appears to be a little bit more strategic and future-oriented than the first one. I already informed you about the variables I used. As you might know, the response categories are reached from every day to never, and I recoded them into frequent use, which means applying this practice at least once a week or daily. And Christine, in her presentation, will do the same with other practices to have a similar approach. So the findings. Can the results based on cycle 1 hold true for cycle 2? And that's, I think, quite convincing. We have on the left side the results we published in 2019 that employed adults less often do perform frequent calculations than unemployed or adults out of the labor force. And we can easily say that the structure is more or less the same in the second cycle, but there had been some effect of increasing frequency for all groups. And we might discuss why is it so. But just to give you an idea, when we look at the European countries who had participated in both cycles of PIAAC, we can see that that in more or less every country, the proportion of those who frequently do calculations about cost and budgets, it has been increased from first cycle to second cycle. So it's not just a German situation. I think we can expand it on other countries as well. So green mark, I think that was easy to answer. The second one is a little bit more complex. When we now compare the two variables I selected for this paper. On the left side, you see the variable, and that will be the same on the next slide as well. On the left part, you see the variable undertake calculations. On the right, use information for financial decisions. The left one is you already know, you have already seen, with this difference between employed and unemployed adults. But when we look at the other variable, which is a little bit more future-oriented, as I would coin it, we see that there is a small difference between unemployed and employed adults. But for example, there's there are a smaller proportion among those out of the labor force. That's an open question. I will go into details not today, but on my future research to find out what are the information behind this. So again, if we compare employed and unemployed adult, just regarding the first variable using undertaking calculation, I can also show you that it's not a situation which is only appearing in Germany, but in other European countries as well, in virtually every country except very few exceptions. So, but now come to the next category, which is gender, and I think this is an important result, that there is hardly any difference between men and women regarding the daily calculations or the frequent calculations. But there is a difference, and it's significant between men and women when we look at the use information variable, use information to make financial decisions. And that, I come back to that later, might link back to this Jean Leif position that there might be a socially constructed division in responsibility for the big money more in the hands of men. Now the third category is age. I think that fits a little bit with my expectations on the left side when it goes, it's about undertake calculations. That is the youngest age group, those between 16 and 25 years old, who are proportionally most active in undertaking calculation. And that should be clear because they leave school, they enter into job market, they earn their first money, they have more need for getting around with their money, and do I have enough or don't I have enough? That's decreasing. Then it might be interesting if we had the oldest cohorts again, like in the first cycle when we had an additional sample in Germany with those older than 65, might go up again in this cohort. And on the second, on the right side, when it's about using information, we see that that it's obviously starting a little bit later in the group between 26 and 35. That's a group with the highest activity in using information for financial decisions, probably because that's a time when they really start thinking about investing in buying real estate or whatever. So I think, yes, we can say that there are differences between these two, with these two variables I just showed you, and I offer you some explanations about the results. Maybe you are of another opinion, I don't know, I'm curious. Looking at this growing proportion of frequent calculations in Germany and in other European countries, research question one could say that today, 10 years after the first cycle of PIAAC, it's much easier to get information via your smartphone to get an overview about your financial situation, maybe in real time. You don't have to go to the bank and get your account. But I think at the same time, between cycle 1 and cycle 2 of PIAAC, we had a pandemic, we had growing inflation, and there might be, or obviously there is greater proportion of adults in the countries who are forced to get a daily overview about their financial situation. Regarding employment or unemployment, I said we could confirm the results from 2019. We could also show that it's not a situation which is exclusively valid for Germany. Would have been a surprise. And I think we can just confirm the conclusions which we have drawn 6 years ago, that it's not just that people in strained economic situations are too passive, but it's the greater economic background and circumstances which lead to the necessity to calculate very often. And now the gender-specific money management, you already have realized that's one of the most important points for me. We could find no gender gap regarding frequent calculations. So gender does not have an own effect on this frequency of calculations, but of course we know that in many countries, at least in Germany, there are weaker economic situations for many women, for example, caused by gender pay gap or by childcare and part-time work. But there is a gender gap regarding using information on important financial decisions. And that, yes, I would dare to say that confirms the Jean Leif positions, that there might be a, however, socially constructed division between men and women regarding the small money things, everyday activities with money, and the more important long-term decisions. Yes, and finally, the little bit like expected, there are differences between younger and older cohorts, and we already have seen that these very frequent calculating your own budget is especially important for younger adults between 16 and 25, while the activity to inform yourself prior to financial decisions appears to be more relevant for those older than 26 years. So my project is part of a funding line regarding financial education in Germany, and when it goes to financial education strategies, that might be useful to have in mind that younger and middle-aged adults have other different educational needs. Thank you very much.